No one saw this coming, not Washington, not Brussels, and certainly not even Amsterdam. Yet here we are, with the Netherlands, one of America's closest allies, making a move that could send shockwaves through the global semiconductor industry. And what's even more remarkable, they're not backing down. When you think about it, everything seems to be hanging on a single decision, one bold move that could throw a wrench into America's entire tech war strategy. The consequences? No one was fully prepared for them. The Netherlands has taken a stand against US pressure, setting off a chain reaction that could disrupt the entire global supply chain for semiconductors. At the center of this storm is ASML, the Dutch technology powerhouse that controls nearly the entire lithography market. Washington fully expected ASML to comply with the ongoing semiconductor export bans, particularly those restricting China's access to cutting-edge technology. However, contrary to these expectations, reports indicate that ASML has continued shipping deep ultraviolet DUV lithography machines to China machines that are essential for chip production. This decision alone carries profound implications, and it raises a much deeper question. Is the Netherlands charting its own course in global trade, or is this a calculated act of economic brinkmanship? ASML's move takes on even greater significance when you consider the warnings from former CEO Peter Wenning. He previously argued that completely cutting China off from advanced semiconductor technology would only accelerate Beijing's push towards self-sufficiency. Looking at recent developments, it seems like he might have been right. China's Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, SMIC, recently made headlines by producing a 7-nanometer chip despite heavy US sanctions. This breakthrough serves as a stark reminder that Western technological dominance is no longer unchallenged. Instead, it may be the start of a major shift in global tech power. If ASML continues shipping to China, is it simply protecting its market share, or is it setting itself up for eventual obsolescence? Some might argue that oil, rare earth metals, or artificial intelligence are the defining resources of our time. But right now, the most valuable asset in the tech world is ASML's extreme ultraviolet EUV lithography machine. These machines are indispensable for producing the most advanced chips, and each one carries a staggering price tag of over $380 million. Without access to these, China would be left far behind the US, Taiwan, and South Korea in chip manufacturing. That is precisely why the Biden administration has been pushing the Dutch government to block ASML from selling EUV machines to China. However, this situation is far from simple. ASML is still the dominant supplier of DUV lithography machine solder, but still essential technology for producing chips used in everyday electronics. The US has also been trying to restrict these sales, but the Netherlands has resisted. The financial implications of this decision are massive. In 2023 alone, China accounted for nearly half of ASML's total sales, generating over $7 billion in revenue. Cutting off China completely could create a significant revenue gap for ASML and allow Chinese-backed alternatives to rise. This places Dutch officials in an incredibly difficult position. If ASML fully complies with US demands, it risks weakening its financial foundation. On the other hand, if it continues selling to China, it runs the risk of straining its crucial relationship with Washington. On the surface, the Netherlands' decision to continue shipments might seem like an act of defiance, but there's another layer to consider: economic survival. Dutch policymakers are not only weighing diplomatic pressures from both the US and China, but also working to ensure ASML retains its position as a leading global tech force. The Dutch government has heavily supported ASML over the years, and allowing the US to dictate its trade policies could make the Netherlands economically dependent on Washington's interests. Meanwhile, Beijing has hinted at possible retaliation if export restrictions tighten any further. China is stockpiling ASML machines, accelerating the development of its own lithography technology, and has pledged $143 billion to strengthen its semiconductor sector. Dutch officials must now ask themselves, if they completely bow to US demands today, will they even have a market in China 5 years from now? Washington has long operated under the assumption that without ASML's EUV machines, China cannot produce the most advanced chips. But that assumption is now being tested. A recent industry report revealed that China's advanced chip production increased by 70% in 2023 alone, despite US sanctions. If the Netherlands continues resisting American pressure, it could end up accelerating China's semiconductor development, helping Beijing close the technological gap much faster than anticipated. Major US chipmakers like Intel, Nvidia, and Qualcomm are watching this situation unfold with growing concern. The current export restrictions have not reduced demand for semiconductors, they've only shifted the supply chain. Reports indicate that while Washington has banned certain chip sales to Huawei, Chinese companies have found alternative ways to secure them through subsidiaries and third-party suppliers. This raises a critical question. If ASML continues to supply China with key equipment, could Washington's restrictions actually be making China more self-sufficient in chip manufacturing? The harder the US tightens its grip on semiconductor exports, the more China invests in developing domestic alternatives. A prime example is Huawei's Mate 60 Pro, which shocked the tech world with its 7nm processor, something experts believe was impossible under current US sanctions. Now China is scaling this technology even further. Reports suggest that China's state-backed semiconductor investment fund has committed another $45 billion to companies like SMIC and YMTC, which are rapidly developing their own lithography capabilities. Dutch industry analysts warn that the longer ASML continues selling to China, the faster China's domestic semiconductor industry will evolve. If the Netherlands is holding on to these trade ties purely for short-term profits, it could ultimately be enabling China to develop the very technology that will replace ASML in the future. This dilemma is even more pronounced when viewed within a broader European context. The European Union has struggled to present a unified front on trade policies, and the Netherlands' latest decision has only deepened the divide. France and Germany have publicly supported Washington's restrictions on semiconductor sales to China, but behind closed doors, European leaders are growing frustrated. Why? Because US companies like Intel and AMD have been granted exemptions that allow them to continue doing business with Chinese firms. This has led European policymakers to ask an uncomfortable question. If Washington is prioritizing its own economic interests, why should Europe blindly follow suit? Reports indicate that major European semiconductor firms are now lobbying against a full-scale ban on sales to China. If the Netherlands' defiance gains traction, it could encourage other European nations to challenge Washington's stance, leading to a broader shift in the global semiconductor trade landscape. Right now, China is already a dominant force in battery production, controlling over 3/4 of the global supply. But its biggest weakness remains high-performance semiconductors, which are critical for electric vehicles, EVs. ASML holds the key to this market, as its EUV machines are the only ones capable of manufacturing the advanced chips needed for cutting-edge automotive technology. The US has imposed strict controls to prevent China from gaining access to this technology, yet ASML's continued shipments of DUV machines are giving Chinese firms the opportunity to catch up. China's EV industry is now the fastest growing in the world, with sales projected to surpass 10 million units this year. If China successfully closes the semiconductor gap, it could completely dominate the EV supply chain, putting pressure on automakers like Tesla, Volkswagen, and General Motors. Despite Washington's expectations, ASML's decision to keep supplying China and China's aggressive drive towards self-reliance signals a major shift in global trade. If China succeeds in building its own lithography industry, it could not only threaten ASML's dominance, but also weaken Taiwan's TSMC and South Korea's Samsung. The semiconductor war is no longer just about technology. It's becoming part of a much larger economic realignment. For decades, Europe has tried to remain neutral, balancing relationships between the US and China. But ASML's decision could mark the moment when Europe's neutrality begins to fade. Washington assumed its allies would comply, but Dutch resistance suggests that Europe may no longer be willing to simply follow US directives. If China ultimately develops an alternative to ASML, it won't just signal a shift in technology, it will redefine global power structures for years to come. If China ultimately develops an alternative to ASML, it won't just signal a shift in technology, it will redefine global power structures for years to come.